This is Smart Poker Study episode 184, The Leak of Neglecting the Most Profitable Poker Situation. In last week's strategy episode, number 183, I discussed mental game control strategies and post-flop 3-bet pot strategies to help you plug the leak of losing money when calling 3-bets. It's poker study time, y'all! Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad to have you back in this house of poker of mine. Thank you very much for subscribing your favorite podcatcher, for leaving a review, and I really do appreciate every time you tell one of your friends they check us out, whether it's the YouTube channel, the podcast, the books, whatever it is. Thank you very much for sharing this show and all my stuff with your buddies. Alrighty, today's episode is going to be me diving into a leak that many of you, maybe you've never even thought of it before. It's neglecting to put yourself in the most profitable situation at the tables. And that situation is called the bread and butter situation. I'll get into where I got the name from, and I'll tell you more about the leak, diagnosing it, and symptoms of the leak as well. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, but first, please visit the show notes page for everything I discussed today, along with screenshots and links at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod184. And you're definitely going to want to go there because I'll be talking about a lot of Poker Tracker 4 leak filters, and sometimes the leak filters can be quite complicated. So you're going to want to go there to see the screenshots of the leak filters. Of course, you can copy them and use them for Poker Tracker 4, and all of you Hold'em Manager users out there, I'm sure you can figure out a way to tailor the Poker Tracker 4 filters so you can find the exact same stuff, the exact same information through your own database in Hold'em Manager 2. Okay, it's time. Gambate!
This is damn exciting stuff.
Okay, let's kick this off with a question. What is the most profitable situation at the tables? Now, if you don't know the answer, that's totally fine. I will share it with you in just a little bit. But some of you might be thinking, you might have a few different ideas of what's the most profitable situation. It could be something as simple as, pocket aces versus pocket kings. Sure, that is a profitable situation, but there's nothing you can control there. You're dealt aces or you're dealt kings, and your opponent is dealt aces or kings. It can be a profitable situation if you're on one side of the coin, on the pocket aces side. But if you have no idea what the most profitable situation at the table is, let me tell you, it is the bread and butter situation. Now, I first learned about this from Tommy Angelo, actually from his book called Elements of Poker, which you've heard me discuss before on the podcast. I highly recommend you read it if you haven't yet. So, from Elements of Poker, he talks about bread and butter situations. These are the situations where he has made and has made the most money, but also they just have the most profit potential within poker. And what bread and butter situations are, there's three key aspects to it. Number one, you made the last raise pre-flop. That means you have initiative on the flop. You can make a cbet. The second part is that you're in position on the flop. And the third is that you're facing one or two opponents. If you meet those three criteria, that is a bread and butter situation. Now, let me break down each of those. First, the last raise pre-flop, meaning you have initiative on the flop, you can make the cbet. As you know, nowadays, people call cbets a whole lot, but most players still fold over 50%, often 60 or 70% to cbets. So when you don't hit that flop, you make the cbet against the right players, they're just going to fold and award you the pot right there. That's why just having initiative is so profitable. Now, the second part of bread and butter is being in position. When you're in position, you have additional information to work with. You get to see your opponent's actions before you have to make your own. And the third aspect of it, being up against just one or two other players. As you know, multi-way pots are harder to take down. They're harder to get value out of your hand, and they're harder to bluff at your opponents. When you're up against just one, or at most two, you've got an easier time. And Tommy Angelo, in the book, he says something along the lines of, when your bread is getting buttered, you're eating. When your bread is not getting buttered, you're going hungry. So bread and butter situations just equal profit to the poker player. That is our food making money, of course. Now, what are some symptoms that this is a leak of yours, neglecting to put yourself in these profitable situations? Well, the first symptom of it is basically that you didn't know what a bread and butter situation is. You never knew where your money was coming from, so you never looked to put yourself in these situations. That's the very first symptom, your lack of knowledge that they even exist. The second symptom for people who neglect the most profitable situation is that you're just a losing player in general. Your win rate is a negative. You're down $1,000, $2,000 for the year, whatever it might be. If you're not putting yourself in these profitable situations, you have a higher likelihood of being a losing player. And the third symptom is that you're just calling pre-flop too frequently, so you're getting to flops. Maybe it's multi-way, maybe it's heads-up situations, but you're getting to the flop without initiative because you're calling pre-flop. And also, when you're just calling way too often, you've basically, with every call that you make, whether you're calling a 2-bet, 3-bet, or a 4-bet, you're telling your opponent, hey, I don't have aces, kings, or even pocket queens here. But your opponent, because they made that last pre-flop raise, they have those in their range. That's what allows them to c-bet so much, and you're going to fold just for that fear that they have a better starting hand than you. And that's part of what makes being in bread and butter situations so profitable. You were the last raiser, you were the one with the better range, and your opponent who called, they capped their range. They're going to be afraid of your hand. And a couple of quick shout outs today. Tom Rowland purchased the Smart HUD. He is now using that to exploit his opponents to the max with the 3 different HUDs, the Cash HUD, the 9 Max Tournament HUD, and the 6 Max Tournament HUD. Those are all included. Also, 7 different custom pop-ups, which Tom is, it takes a lot to get used to, but I'm sure Tom is working his way through them all, learning the stats, learning the placement of everything, and figuring out how to exploit his opponents. If you want to get the Smart HUD, just like Tom did, smartpokerstudy.com/smarthud. And we have 2 webinar purchasers from this past week. Dave Normie picked up the Mashing the Micros webinar, and he also got my brand new KISS cash game ranges with that purchase. And Zelko Arnautovic purchased the How to Study Poker webinar. So these 2 are just killing it. They're doing their studies. They're doing the thing 1 hour per day. Well, that's what I recommend. I don't know if they're doing it, but hopefully they're putting that time in, not just watching the webinars, but also practicing the things I discuss, going through their databases, in however I discuss it within those 2 webinars. So if you want to purchase those webinars or any of my other webinars, please just go to the show notes for today, smartpokerstudy.com/pod184 for details on how you can. And one final shout out today to Stuart Roberts, a buddy of mine who has started his own poker journey, and he's actually documenting the entire process of him working day in, day out to study, improve his game, practice at the tables, research, review his hands, all that jazz. He created a brand new website called bitstochips.com. That's bitstochips.com. And he has a YouTube channel called From Bits to Chips. He only has a few videos up right now, but he's going to be putting up more and more as the months and the years go on, documenting his journey from a poker fish to an exceptional poker player. Good luck to you, Stuart. And everybody, please check out his website, check out his YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and help him on his journey. Alrighty, back to class, poker people. Let's get to diagnosing this leak, because we aren't going to fully understand this leak until we really see what it's costing us. So right now I'm going to run through a lot of various filters in order to find our win rate in different situations. So really, what's going to help you out the most is if you go to the show notes page to look at the different Poker Tracker 4 filters and just kind of follow along. I'll do my best in the podcast to verbally describe what I'm, the filters that I'm going through. But really, hit the show notes for the easiest way to do it. So the very first thing is you're going to want to see your total win rate over a large sample. Now, I recommend over 30,000 hands. A 30,000 hand sample size to get a decent idea of your win rate. You're going to look at your win rate by position. Now, normally, the later the position, the higher the win rate. Your EP win rate might be positive 10 big blinds per 100, MP positive 15, cutoff positive 30, button positive 45. I don't know what it is, but hopefully it's getting larger as you're getting later in position. And then for the small blind and the big blind, ideally you would like to see negative 20 as your win rate in the small blind and negative 40 as your win rate in the big blind. So that's the first step, just understanding your total win rate by position and as a total, of course. And what I want you to do is open up an Excel spreadsheet, open up your poker journal, however you want to, record the number of hands in each position and the win rate. Now, this is your baseline. This is what you're doing to gauge how well your studies and how well your play, how well your focus on this leak is affecting your profits, right? Because the prior 30K hands, you ended up with, let's say, a -5 big blinds per 100 hands. Over the next 10K hands, hopefully you've changed that from a -5 to a positive. But you don't want to just look at the totals. You want to look at the various positional win rates too. See how things are going as a whole, your whole game. So record all those numbers in a journal or Excel for later comparison. Now, the second part of all of this is taking a look at your win rates when you saw the flop. Now, as you know, the bread and butter situation is seeing the flop in position versus 2 or 3 other players with initiative. So the whole situation is just, I guess, revolves around seeing the flop. So let's take a look at your current or past 30,000 hands, various seeing the flop win rates. So what you want to do, the first filter is basically just saw flop. And now record the number of hands that you saw the flop and your win rate when you saw the flop. The next one is saw flop, but your position is in position. Now, normally, your win rate when you're in position on the flop is going to be higher than your out of position win rate on the flop. And that's the third part, or the third filter to go through. Saw flop, but out of position. And then now, something interesting about Poker Tracker 4. When you filter for in position, it is strictly in position. If you're up against 2 other players, you have position on both of them. And opposite of that, out of position, if you're up against 2 other players, that's out of position versus both. You're the very first person to act. Now, both of those, they do not track when you're in the middle. If there's 3 players and you're the middle actor, I guess that's what you can say. You have the middle opportunity to act. You know, there's somebody ahead of you and somebody after you. Those 2 prior filters don't record that. So what you're going to have to do for this one is saw flop, but then you're going to have to say not in position, and also you're going to have to add not out of position. And it's pretty interesting. If you do this right, the number of hands in position, plus the number of hands out of position, plus the number of hands neither in nor out of position, that will equal the total hands where you saw flop. And of course, like I said, record the number of hands in each of those situations and the win rate for each. And now for the third set of filters I want you to look up and record the win rates for are the bread and butter situations. So the very first one is the bread and butter situation for 2 to 3 players like Tommy Angelo talked about. Now the filter, once again, go to the show notes page, please, to see these, is the filter is going to be raised preflop, just any raise. The second part of the filter is you're in position on the flop. The third part of the filter is the players seeing the flop between 2 and 3 players. And the fourth part of the filter is that you had the opportunity to cbet or you had the opportunity to raise a donk bet. Now, that last part, it might sound complicated, but it's very important to have. You made the last raise preflop, so that means you need to have the opportunity to cbet, right? But sometimes your opponents take away that opportunity by donk leading into you. That's why you need that or right there. You need to get to the flop in position, 1 to 2 opponents. You raised preflop and the opportunity to cbet or facing a donk bet. That means you have initiative. So you want to record the number of hands and the win rate for that one. Now just make a slight adjustment to this filter. So you're going to change it from 2 to 3 players seeing the flop to just 2 and 2 players seeing the flop. The third filter is bread and butter again, but it's just 3 players exactly. So just change the number of players seeing the flop between 3 and 3. And then the final one is just bread and butter with any number of players. So just delete that filter for any number of players seeing the flop. Now, when you run this one, it's just going to show you all of them, anywhere from 2 up to 9 players seeing the flop. And of course, once again, make sure you're recording all of those hands played in the various scenarios and your win rate for each. Now, the last part of this filtering process that we're doing, the win rates that we are recording, I want you to take a look at your win rates in various common spots. Now, there are 3 of these common spots. The very first one is call any preflop 2-bet. Record the number of hands and the win rate. The next common spot is calling a preflop 3-bet. Record the number of hands and the win rate. And then the final one is calling a preflop 4-bet. Record the number of hands and the win rate. Now, I went through my database on some of my students. One of my students, calling a preflop 2-bet, he actually had negative 140 big blinds per 100 hands. But when I ran it for bread and butter situations, his was positive 60. So calling the preflop 2-bet was negative 140, just losing when calling. And when he put himself in bread and butter, positive 60. He was making money. Now, on a different student, call preflop 3-bet, his win rate was negative 484. But when I looked at just his bread and butter situations, his was positive 72. Calling a 3-bet, he's losing 484 big blinds per 100 hands. Getting in a bread and butter situation, positive 72. He's killing it right there. And I looked at a third student of mine. His win rate when calling the preflop 4-bet was negative 1,211 big blinds per 100 hands. Sure, it was only 55 hands. It's kind of a large sample calling 4-bets right there. But it was negative 1,200. Holy cow, terrible. But when we looked at just his bread and butter situations, his was at positive 115. Positive 115! He's making way more money when he's putting himself in bread and butter situations as opposed to calling 4-bets. So we should probably never call any 4-bets. Not never. He should develop a plan for it. And he and I can get into that at some point. But, I mean, all of these three students, they were losing in these various other scenarios, calling 2-bets, calling 3-bets, calling 4-bets, but they were all positive in bread and butter situations. And now, if you are a losing player listening to this, you're probably going to find the exact same thing. You might be positive in the calling 2-bets, calling 3-bets, or calling 4-bets, but I guarantee you are going to be positive in the bread and butter situations. So that's what fixing this leak is all about. Getting you to search, to hunt for bread and butter situations and putting yourself in more of them because you're going to be more profitable that way. Challenge! Here's my challenge to you for this episode. Run all of the filters I discussed for your play this year or for the past 30,000 or greater hands. Record your stats. Then for the next 10,000 hands or more, try to put yourself in bread and butter situations. You are striving to be in position on the flop, with initiative, and against one or two other players. At the end of at least 10,000 hands, record all the stats again to see your progress. Now it's your turn to take action and do something positive for your poker game.
Oh, that's it now. Get out there and be somebody. Go write a book.
And this episode truly is not complete until you go to the show notes page, www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod184. And it's really not over until you run through your database all of these filters and record the win rates. Get to it, poker people! Thank you so much for listening today. I'm putting out more episodes now, so make sure you enable the Alexa flash briefing skill. Just search for Smart Poker Study in the Amazon store. And of course, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcatching app. And please send me those questions, sky@smartpokerstudy.com. Alrighty, poker people, in the next episode, number 185, I'm going to hit you with a 3-question Q&A. Word of mouth is the best advertising, so thank you very much for sharing the show with other poker people. Your sharing and caring is what helps us grow. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.